this time, so I won't be reading off of a device. Hi, and welcome to the Prairie Fibre Witch podcast. I'm Sarah, coming to you from Edmonton, Alberta, on the Canadian prairies. And I normally say where I am an online student, but I am done. I have finished my degree. I've been studying online, pursuing my Master's of Library and Information Studies for the past, I think we're at 3 years, just in 3 years. So, yeah, that's pretty exciting and also kind of surreal. So, yeah, what have I been doing? Last time I talked to you, I was in the throes of writing my big final project, which was a large e-portfolio with essays for all the different competencies involved in librarianship, and I finished it. I can't believe I finished it, but I did. I also had another course which had a large project, which we sort of worked throughout the semester, and then there was like a big presentation of it at the end, and yeah, that's done and was really well received. It was a project with like a real client analyzing a website. So I worked with somebody that I knew at the local university here, the University of Alberta, and they were really happy with what I had, the analysis that I did and presented to them. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah. So, I mean, busy with the final semester, wrapping everything up. And then also, it's been gardening season. I don't necessarily talk about this a lot, but when I moved back to Alberta, how many years ago? We're at 5 years ago now. I moved back to live with my parents, and before I left, me and my brother had really landscaped my parents' yard, so that because we both worked at a greenhouse during our undergraduate degrees at the time, and you know, when you're around plants all day and what you can do is read about gardening and you want to do things, and you know, my parents were very willing to let us dig up parts of the lawn, but that means there's a lot of maintenance when you come back. And since my mom has retired, she started growing tomato plants for her own interest, and starting them from seed and getting lots of different varieties. And then somebody, you know, said to her, oh, well, why don't you just sell your extra plants? So for the past, I guess it's been like 5 years, she has been growing too many tomato plants and selling off the extras, and growing about 20 to 30 plants herself. So this year, she went overboard. We went overboard. I don't know. It's really easy when you're planting tiny seeds to be like, oh, well, we'll just do like 5 or 6 more of all these different varieties. And, you know, we got some new ones this year, but then we don't need to edit the old ones. We'll just add more. And then suddenly you're growing 700 tomato plants in your basement and backyard. And though my mom does have a greenhouse, she also grows a lot of her own plants, her own bedding plants and flowers. So there's not, 700 plants, they take up a lot of room once they get to be pretty tall. So that was sort of the main occupation right after I graduated, was managing the tomatoes, getting them out the door, and then also dealing with all the other plants that kind of got left for a little while. So it's been a busy spring. Yes. And they also closed down golf courses for a few weeks. So my mom, well, they limited golfing because our numbers were really bad in Alberta, to people in the same household. You could only golf with one other person in your household. Or if you didn't have anyone in your household, with one other person who you would always golf with. So both my parents were sort of off golfing for a while, and they've just our numbers have come down again and vaccinations have gotten better. So they've just relaxed that as of June 1st. You can now golf with people who are not in your household. So my mom was golfing this morning. Although she's back now, I'm using her phone to record. And what else have I been doing? So, like, I've also been exploring the world of fountain pens. I have been a fountain pen user for much of my life. I started using fountain pens in grade 6. And can't remember if it was throughout junior high or sort of off and on in junior high, but definitely from high school onward, all of the notes that I took were with fountain pen. I started with, like, when I was in high school, I was using, you could still get little inexpensive, I can't remember if it was like $10 or $20, a little Schaefer fountain pen from Staples. And they had like all different colors that you could get at that time. So I would just, me and friends of mine had these pens and we would just like rotate through the colors on a basis. So like my notes, I don't think I have my high school notes anymore. But they would have just been like rainbows of different colored inks that I could get. Anyway, so like from that point on, I'm a fountain pen fan. And I have explored a little bit the online community of fountain pen people, but it can be very expensive because fountain pens, I mean, the really nice ones are really expensive. Like for many years, the Mont Blanc mountain pen was like the fountain pen to have, and those are now like nearly $1,000. I do not have pens that are in that price range. My most expensive pen for many years was a Lamy All-Star, which I bought in university, which is when I discovered like real fountain pens. Not Schaefer's a real fountain pen, but like, you know, like a non-student fountain pen. I was at a conference in Vancouver and was with a friend of mine, and we were walking in Gastown and happened to pass by the Vancouver Pen Shop, which I would recommend, even though that's like now nearly 20 years ago. I think it's still there, and I would imagine it's still very good. And I had seen this pen in the window that attracted my attention that looked really cool. And then I went to try it, and it was like too big and awkward to use. And so the person who was having me, like, that's the first time somebody suggested to me, oh, well, you should actually write words with your pen. Okay. And also, like, pay attention to how your handwriting is with the pen. And, like, if it's something that's well balanced for your hand and the way you write, then your writing should look better. And so, yeah, so I had tried out this other pen. I think it was like a Rotring, I don't know what it was. And it didn't look nice, and it was very scratchy. My handwriting looked very scratchy. And then she suggested that I try the Lamy a Lamy, either a Safari or an All-Star. And at the time, I mean, I think they still have very sort of limited colors that are available on an ongoing basis, but they always have like a rotating special color. And so I really liked the special green All-Star that was that year. And I splurged. I think I was paid $80 for that pen because Lamy's, I mean, especially at that time in Canada with the exchange rate and everything. So I've always had an eye for Lamy's when I'm traveling to see like what the costs are. And that's usually when I update my pen, is when I find a good price. And so because I just graduated, I was talking on text message with my brother, and he was like, oh, what are you going to get for a graduation gift? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you should get a watch, and then making joke suggestions for watches, like a Timex they have a Timex that has like a special edition Pac-Man exterior to it. And I was like, I mean, there's sort of a joke in my family that I need a digital watch to read time properly because my first watch was a digital watch, and when I was in grade 1, and yeah, I can read a conventional clock. It's just sometimes I have made mistakes in the past where I don't have one where the numbers are marked, that I have missed meetings, but that was like nearly 20 years ago. So anyway, I mean, who needs a watch now anyway, because every device you have tells you what time it is in digital form. So I'm kind of good on that count. And also you can set alarms for when meetings are, which is what I tend to do. So I was like, oh, well, let's look at fountain pens. So I did a sort of a dive on fountain pens and what would be an interesting fountain pen, and had this idea of like getting a nicer fountain pen and maybe like dipping my toes in the 14 karat gold nibs. And I ended up buying a Lamy 2000, which I'm very happy with. I love how it writes. It's just sometimes, when you get a pen that you like how it writes, it's just like instantly, as soon as you test it, you can tell whether you like it or not. And that was really with the Lamy 2000. It was like instantly, this is the pen I want. So, but I mean, I've still been watching pen videos and ink videos, and yeah, I've been playing around with fountain pens. If you like fountain pens and you want to talk about fountain pens, I'd be happy to talk about fountain pens. I mean, this is my writing with a TWSBI Eco T in extra fine nib, and this ink is J. Urbain Vert, which I quite like. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get on to knitting stuff, which is probably why you're here, not fountain pens. That's a side thing. Okay. So it's been 2 months. That's where I've been. What have I finished in that time? Like 4 things. Oh, one of which is over there, which I'll get in a minute. Okay, so I finished a pair of socks, a hat, and a sweater, which I will talk about individually. Okay, now I made a mess. Okay, we'll just pile that there. So these socks, I think I talked to you about them last time, and these are obviously Christmas socks. Last time they were looking a little bit like pro-Americana socks. One toe was blue and one toe was green. I have since, as you can tell, switched out the blue toe to make another green toe, and then put in heels and cuffs, and they are finished. So, what did I do here? Let me tell you about the yarn. This main yarn is a self-striping colorway by Tiny Human Knits. It's called Baker's Twine. It's one of her Christmas colorways. And her skeins come in 50-gram skeins. I think some people buy 2 skeins to be able to make 2 socks. I have small enough feet. I wear a woman's 6.5, depending on the width. So I can get away with using 50 grams to get a pair of socks for me. So I've been experimenting a little bit with like knitting a sock tube out of this and then dividing it up with afterthought heels and toes and cuffs. Kind of like what people do when they have a circular sock machine. I do not have a circular sock machine, so I've been also knitting the tubes. This time what I tried to do was I knit them toe to toe. So the tube that you would have seen, I started here, do like toe up sock for the toe. So you start with, I started with Judy's Magic Cast On and then increased until I got 64 stitches. Then I knit the tube all the way to the end until I ran out of yarn, and then I knit another toe, which is like a toe on a cuff down sock. I can't quite remember. There might have been like a little bit of red at one end that I might have taken off so that it ended on the beige at both ends. I don't recall, but like the idea is to use as much of the yarn as possible. And then what I did, after having this sort of unwearable sock tube with toes at either end and no opening, I cut it in half. So I cut one stitch and then unraveled an entire row to be able to put in the cuffs. Boop. And then after putting in the cuffs here, then I went in and measured carefully and marked and then like double measured and whatever, and put in the heel, which is an afterthought heel. So it's like the same as doing a toe, a cuff down toe. Yeah, so that's essentially how these were made. The reason why I'm going into that detail is because I'm making another pair of socks with this kind of construction because I kind of liked it. So I've been referring to this as like toe-to-toe sock tube, although I suppose it could also be like a sock snake if you prefer. And I mean, this definitely works with the 2-color stripe because when you're going toe-to-toe, right? One sock's going one way, one sock's going to be going the other way. So when you divide in half, your stripes will be inverted on one sock compared to the other. With a 2-color stripe, you're definitely not going to see that. On the next pair that I've done like this, you will see, it will be noticeable. I don't think it's super noticeable. I don't need my socks to match all the time. And especially if you're working with something that has like a large stripe repeat, unless you really want them to match, you're gonna have to buy like 2 self-stripings, 2 50-gram skeins to make them match. And I don't always want to do that. I like being efficient in my yarn usage and using everything possible. You will notice that the toes and heels are one color. Toes and heels one color. And then the cuffs are like a slightly different color. The yarns for this were some green mini skeins that I had from my Wild in the Woods advent calendar that I had at Christmas time. So I just used 2 greens that were fairly close to each other, and I kind of like that it's a little bit contrasty because I like, these might be a 15 row cuff, but I like a good cuff, and I can't quite get it all out of one mini. So you'll see I think a lot of times if I'm going to do all 3 contrasting bits, that I will be using contrasting bits, that I'll probably pop in another color for the cuffs. Anything else interesting about these socks? They were knit on 2mm needles, which is a US 0. I knit these magic loop. I'm pretty sure I knit these magic loop. I don't know. I go back and forth between DPNs and magic loop. Pretty much on a like pair of sock to pair of sock basis. So, and I've given up on wooden needles for sock sizes because I'm trying to get a fairly firm but doesn't quite hurt my hand tension. I have given up on wooden needles and I use metal. I have some Hayahayas, I have some Chaogus, I have some Addies. All of those I like. So, okay, so that's the Baker's Twine socks. The next thing that I finished is this hat. This is the Musselburgh hat by Ysolda Teague. And it is a really interesting construction. And it's kind of similar to the socks. It's like, you know, you're making a double layer. So you start at the top and then you end at the top because this gets folded in half. So, and the way the pattern is written is you do not need to gauge swatch because you will measure your gauge as you're knitting, which is really cool. And there's like instructions for a whole bunch of different gauges to make a hat. And then you end up with this doubled hat which is like, it's just a big stockinette tube. And I think I would have liked it a little more if I had it just on like a 16-inch circular. I didn't have a 16-inch circular in the size of needle that I was using. I believe also a 2 millimeter needle, or US 0. And so I was magic looping it with one of my larger needles, which I did not enjoy as much, because it's like a larger circumference than a pair of socks. The loop itself isn't as big, and anyway, I didn't enjoy it as much. But I have since acquired a 2 millimeter 16-inch circular, because I like this hat and I think it would be good to have a whole bunch of them. So this is the hat. I think I will wear it, well, you know, over the ears, but like with a little brim thing, although you could also do the slouchy. I mean, this one's sort of at a tension that it's not as slouchy. Whatever. It's like, and I mean, if you wanted it to be even slouchier, you could knit it longer. It's your hat. Let's put this on again. I kind of like it like this. I finished this after winter was over. Even here in Alberta, even though we had snow, like, what was the last snowstorm? May? It was not so cold that I needed a hat. So I have not tested it out, but I have a feeling that it'll be good in an Alberta Canadian winter, which is shorthand for cold and snowy. So, did I talk about the yarn? I don't think I did. This is, I like this. This is a non-superwash yarn. This is the Natural Sock by Woolly Mammoth Fibers in the colorway Hatch. I really like her yarns, and I have too much in my stash, so I decided to just grab one and make a hat. I cast this on my birthday, near my birthday, and finished it much later, as will happen. Yeah. And I mean, I have this thing where it's like I make hats, but then I only wear like the same hat for 5 years every winter. I know I'm allowed to have more hats than that, and I do have more hats than that, but that's just how it kind of ends up. I don't know. There's not logic. I also do the same thing with mittens. I have this like the same pair of mittens in my, just keep them in my coat, and then that's all I need. I can have more mittens too. I know that. It just doesn't somehow work out. And then the sweater that I finished. This is a sweater that I knit for my dad. I think I've talked about it before. This is the Tsubaki Pullover by Hiroko Fukatsu. And it is a very lovely pattern. It was very interesting to knit. It had a different kind of construction. It sort of has like, I believe this is like a saddle shoulder, top down in the round, and then you knit the sleeves flat, and then you kind of zip them up, and it makes this nice like underarm seam. So you're not really seaming. It's a very interesting zip up. It's called a zip up seam. I'm not going to go into it, but it's very pleasing. And yeah, it's got these crazy cables, which these big cables I could not do without a cable needle, because it's like an 8-stitch cross. And if you can do that without a cable needle, I will applaud you. Yeah. It has been blocked, and my dad didn't even wait for it to be blocked to wear it out into the world. He like stole it immediately and wore it to work one day, which I take as a good sign that he just really likes the sweater and wants to wear it. I did have to, because I was knitting it for him, and this pattern is written for women. I don't find it particularly feminine in its styling or its in its details. So basically all I had to do for him was adapt the length. So I knit the sleeves a little bit longer, and I knit the overall length longer as well. And I had, as this was a sweater quantity I had purchased for myself, I needed one extra skein to be able to get the ribbing the length that I needed. I didn't use all, I think I used maybe, I suppose I could measure, probably a third to a half a skein to make it longer. Anyway, he really likes it and has worn it out into the world like right away. And this yarn is the Rerum Natura Ulysse in the colorway Iroise, which is this very lovely blue teal color, not unlike the ink color that I have in my pen right now. And yeah, it was a fun knit. Although it became kind of epic. I cast this on in December and I finished it in April, beginning of May. It was a long time. It was the sort of thing that I kept like putting it down to work on other projects, which, I mean, that sometimes happens when I make things for other people. But my dad was a good sport and didn't mind. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to have to go get. The last thing that I finished recently is this little cross-stitch pattern. This is the Winter Bird kit by Junebug and Darlin, and I had a kit for this that I bought when it was released at Christmas time, and I had started stitching it then, but then kind of just like stopped working on it and left it for a long time for no good reason. I don't know, maybe it was all that backstitch. There kind of came a point where like I needed to do the backstitch to be able to place all the rest of the motifs. So I put it down and didn't really work on it. And then I just picked it up and I was like, okay, we're going to finish this. And then it was done right away. So there you go. Yeah, so this is, as this was a kit, these are all the colors that come in the kit. The designer has since released, I think, 2. There's either one out, but I think there's plans to do like the whole 4 seasons of these little birds. So I think spring is out. I think there's a summer one that's either coming or it might be out also. And her designs are always built to be framed in a little embroidery hoop. I like framing things in frames, so I haven't decided yet. I don't have a frame that'll work for this, so I've just left it flat for now. Yeah, so that has been everything that I have finished in the past 2 months, which, I mean, isn't really a lot. I've definitely been knitting a lot, but I think I've been just, you know, rotating through projects and working on things, but not quite finishing them. Okay. Next. This is a sweater that I cast on a whim. I also said screw it to like my entire stash and ordered the yarn. This is the front. And ordered the yarn from a local place. This is, the yarn that I'm using is Briggs & Little Sport, which is a Canadian yarn that is very affordable, and the Sport is one of my favorite yarns. So this sweater cost me about $35 Canadian in yarn. This is the Sparky Pullover by Andrea Mowry. And I blocked it as I was working on the yoke to measure gauge, and I was close enough that I kept going. And as you can see, I've got one arm finished. And I have tried this on a few times and ran into a situation with the neck. The neck is quite open. It's like almost off the shoulder on me. So this has sort of been in the like naughty pile or like in timeout or something for a couple of weeks while I decide what I want to do to fix it. My plan is generally to cut off the ribbing and maybe take out the first set of increases or something, and then pick up the stitches and knit up. But I think it just, yeah, I have to consider my plan for attack for this. So it is on timeout in the meantime. It has like, can you see? Ooh, not really. There's waste yarn put in for pockets. It has like little forethought, afterthought pocket things. And yeah, I mean, the yarns that are called for the sweater are Spin Cycle, and I believe also the Magpie Fibers. So this is this sweater is related to the sweater that started the conversation about yarn affordability last summer on Instagram. This is the pullover version. The other one was a cardigan. And I am definitely knitting an economical version of the sweater out of the Briggs & Little Sport, which I just am loving. This color that I chose, this red. So the colors are washed white and red heather, which is this great, like you can see, it's this great complicated heather, which I love a good heather. I love a good heathered yarn. It's got like blue in it and kind of pops of, the red kind of has pops of orange or something, and like the blue kills it a little bit when it's blended and comes out kind of burgundy-ish, and I love it. And this has been really fun to knit. This main pattern here is like fun to do and also like easy to see if you mess up, and just engaging. Who doesn't love, I mean, it's basically like a corrugated, like you alternate, right? You alternate every few rows and then you're alternating colors. Anyway, it's like, it's fun but mindless at the same time. And then when you're bored with doing that, then it's time to like throw in another chart. So I've been really enjoying this. If I can figure out the formula to make the neck a little bit better, I think I will really love this sweater. And I think I'm working with a 3.75 millimeter needle. I have it written down somewhere, I hope. I always do this. I always work on something and then take it off the needles and then leave it for a little bit, and then I'm like, wait, what was I knitting with? I had kind of paused it because I was at a point where I should address this neck issue before I knit more of the sweater. And I didn't have my needles with me to be able to, like a set of circulars to do the neck, because I was knitting the arm on double points. So, yeah. Okay, next. This is my other toe-to-toe sock project. Oop. And I have just cut in the placement for the heels. These are my Faded Rainbow socks. Faded Rainbow is the name of this colorway, also by Tiny Human Knits. And when I ordered this yarn, she very kindly included this mini skein, which I was very much not expecting. Which looks very lovely with this yarn. So I'm going to be using it for the toes, and then also I'm using it for the heels. And then the cuffs are a mini skein that I had purchased from Nomadic Yarns in their, I think it's called Golden is the colorway name. And you can tell, like, the yellow's up here, the yellow's down there, the blue's there, the blue's here. These are inverted stripes. So this is what I was talking about before. When one knits toe-to-toe socks, toe toe to toe, and then you divide it in half. One's going to be inverted from the other one. I mean, you can also see where the purples are, that these weren't going to match anyway. So it's kind of a way to make them not match more, which I guess you could make the argument makes it look more intentional. Sure, okay. But they still feel like a pair to me, because there's like, I think I counted it as like a 12 color repeat. I mean, the heels are almost in the same place color wise. So, and like the toes kind of ended in the same place and the cuffs are in the same place. I don't know. They feel like friends to me. And you can see I've got 2 sets of circular needles going here. I am knitting this magic loop. This would also work with DPNs if you so chose. I have done it with DPNs. And I got 1 Chowgu going and 1 Addy. So what else can I say about these? These are on 2mm needles. I'm sort of taking a series of pictures of these at the different points to sort of illustrate how I did this. Yeah, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to knit it this way. Even though you're just knitting a big tube, I had started these when I got my first shot of my vaccine. I started 2 pairs of socks at that point because I knew I was going to be sitting for 15 minutes and I didn't have a small project that I could take with me. So I was like, I should cast on socks. I have some self-striping sock yarn. And then I had 2 that I both really liked. So I actually cast both of them on. And I didn't take these with me when I got my vaccine. I took a different pair. And then a friend of mine happened to message me during my 15 minutes and we had a whole conversation. So I barely knit anyway. But you know, it's good to be prepared, right? And I got a nice pair of socks almost out of the deal. These are almost done. I picked these up last week when I was attending a virtual library conference. And yeah, the second day I knit through basically, I think, this much of one of the socks. And then this weekend I was just determined to finish the tube. So that's what happened. Yeah, that's these socks. And I kind of like that I have this like stripey sock bag now, because I just love stripes on too many stripes. I really enjoy that. And it's kind of purple, and I like purple. Okay, what's next? Next, we have the other socks that I cast on. These are the ones that I actually took with me to my COVID appointment, and basically knit like 3 rows maybe after my jab. And here we go. I've got 1 sock completely finished. There's nothing like when I'm feeling blah about something to just whip up a pair of self-striping socks, especially if I'm not entirely sure how the stripes are going to look. This actually came in a gobstopper ball. This yarn is by Valkyrie Fibres. This is her sort of Mandelorian inspired colorway. It's called This Is the Way. And this yarn is her, what is it? High Twist BFL sock, which I really enjoy a high twist. I also really enjoy BFL. So I was happy to see that base as an option when I ordered this on a whim after seeing it on Instagram. And I had no idea what these stripes were going to look like. I liked the colors, seeing it in the gobstopper. And I suppose if I did a real analysis, I could get an idea of the proportions, but I'm not that big of a nerd. Anyway, I love how these stripes are coming out. I'm just such a fan of how they're coming up. And you can see I just picked up the gusset stitches on the second sock. So that's where I am. Again, magic loop. These are on some Chowgus. We're going to go with, I'm going to say these are 2mm needles, or a US size 0, which is kind of my go-to at the moment. If it's a finer yarn, like if I'm doing woolly mammoth socks with her natural sock, those ones I'll do on a 1.75mm or a US 00, which I have some double points and some circulars at that size. So yeah, I'm really enjoying these, and I'll probably go back and finish these after I finish the sock tube socks, the toe-to-toe sock tubes. Okay. And my last thing that I am working on, my last knitting thing that I'm working on is, I signed up to do a test knit. I think it started last week, and again, on a whim. There's a lot of starting things on whims. I think part of it has to do with the fact that I spent a good part earlier this year like not casting new things on, and trying to finish like long-standing whips. I was good, and I finished a good chunk of them. I got it down to like 11 total new old whips. So I thought that was pretty good. So then I cast a bunch on. So I don't know what we're at now, but I think we're at like 13, 14 maybe. So it's not bad. Yeah, I'm not going to cast on another sweater in the next little while, because what does that bring me to? I think I have 4 sweaters going right now. 2 of them, well, one I really haven't touched in a while. Another one I touched a little bit, but it wasn't enough to show you anything new. And then I have these 2, which are kind of new cast-ons. Yeah, so I did that again. This time I actually am using stash yarn, which I happen to have enough. And this is a test knit for Reed Keys, who is High Fiber Habit on Instagram. I saw it because somebody I follow is also test knitting it, and I liked the look of the sweater. I've been calling it like my cocoon cardigan. She has a different name for it. I don't know if she wants that advertised yet, but I am allowed to show you the sweater. The test knit itself isn't secret. And so it's going to be a big oversized cardigan with pockets. I'm just about at the point where I will be putting in the yarn and start knitting the pockets. And like, it's going to be a nice oversized outdoor sort of coatigan kind of thing. It's written for worsted weight, worsted to Erin. I believe she's using an Erin weight Noro yarn. I am using a sport weight yarn. This is by Ursa Yarn Co. This is their Mouton base, which I have heard a few times is basically over-dyed Briggs & Little Sport, which is my favorite yarn. So I'm a fan. And so I'm using it doubled. I'm knitting from the inside and the outside of one skein at a time. And so you can see this is like a really nice big brioche, and like instantly got gauge, which is nice. Instantly and easily. So I'm not gonna do any intense blocking with this because I don't need it to be really huge. And I'm enjoying, like, these increases for the sleeve are really fun. So I've been really interested in this, and I've gotten really far. And yeah, sometimes when I test knit stuff, I'm like the fastest. It's not a competition. I know it's not a competition, but so often when I test knit because I'm really excited about what the project is, and then I feel like because it's a test knit, I should just work on it exclusively to try and get it done, and then I just sort of race through it. So this one has been on pause, as I've been mostly this weekend working on those socks. But I think I just said I was going to pick up those other stripy socks. I should probably pick this up. instead. We'll see what I feel like doing this evening. I mean, I'm almost at the pocket thing, so I might, like, that's kind of exciting. So, I'll probably, well, whatever. I mean, who knows? In the 7 months until my next podcast, I'm sure it'll be finished. It's not really going to be 7 months, but I'm not well, I don't know. It could be. Who knows? And then the last two things I'm going to show you, I am actually going to show you because even though they're like half finished cross stitch, because I haven't shown you in a while and they're kind of far along. This is the Chinese Zodiac by Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery. This was a stitch along for last year that has been over for a long time, and I started it late. I think it was like half. Well, it was like this was the first clue that I got, so that's how far along they were in the stitch along when I started. So, yeah. I have only I was working on this very steadily and really enjoying it. And then I put it down because Stash Dash started and cross stitch hasn't been included in Stash Dash yet. I am using the Cosmo threads, which are called for in the pattern. I wanted to try them out. And I'm stitching this on 36 count sand by Picture This Plus. I am a sucker for tiny stitches. So yeah, I like stitching on linen. This is linen. So this is being stitched 2 threads of floss over 2 threads of linen. And yeah, I'm really enjoying how this is coming out. And then for a while, I was juggling this cross stitch in the evenings and then working on this other cross stitch in my room. And this is the K from the Maker pattern by Junebug and Darlin. And this is knit out of stitched. This is stitched. This is stitched out of DMC colors that are mostly called for in the pattern. I've switched out 1 or 2 from an alternate version of this that Zoe had posted on her Instagram stories at one point. And I mean, the big thing that I've changed is what I'm stitching on. This is being stitched on a 40 count linen. The colorway is Midnight by Weeks Dye Works. And I mean, the only thing that I'm like a little iffy about, I don't know, it shows up nicely on camera, is like this isn't super visible, but I think it's okay. And I had switched out these grays for like a lighter gray because the gray is like exactly this color. Yeah, you can see it here. It like totally bleeds in. But the way that gray is being used in the design, it's always like at the middle of a little flower thing. So I think it'll work out. So yeah, I'll go back to these at some point. And oh, this one is being stitched 1 thread over 2 threads because it's 40 count. And yeah, I like me some seriously tiny stitches. Yeah, okay, so that's all that I've been working on. And the cross stitch has sort of been sitting for the past couple weeks. But you know, when you haven't recorded anything in 2 months, there's a lot to talk about. Books. Okay, we're taking a little tea break. Okay. I have read a few books in the past while. I think last time I was partway through this book and I finished it. It is Older Sister, Not Necessarily Related by Jenny Hagen Wills, which is a story of a Canadian Korean woman who was adopted as a baby from Korea and raised in Canada by a white family. And it's kind of like a diary. of her feelings and experiences, making a connection and making relationships with her birth family in Korea. And yeah, it's not happy. It's not, well, there's definitely some trauma there, and I think there's a lot of interesting. There's a lot of valuable experience to learn from what that's like, and like much of her stay in Korea when she first meets her birth family. She's staying at this particular hostel which is just full of people who are on the same quest. They were raised in Canada or America, or I feel like there were some from the UK as well, raised in white families and then going back to Korea to try and connect with their birth families, which, not everybody was able to do, right? Like, there's not always records for what the family was, or the family doesn't want to meet them, or it's just a very messy situation. And so it was very valuable to read because it's not something I have experienced in my life. I'm not adopted. I was raised in the culture that I was born into. Yeah. So it was a very powerful story. It was, again, it's like little snippets. I mean, I think I said last time, the image that's on the cover is of this particular cloth preparation that is used in Korea as as a wrapping paper, reusable wrapping, I think, for gifts or food. And so it's like a little patchwork of smaller squares. And so like the story is kind of like that. It's like little snippets of her experience throughout like this probably 5-year period. It's not dated, of her experience, how this influenced her life. And yeah, it was a very impactful book to read. And then I followed that up with some fiction books. The next book that I read was Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. I really like his books. I can't remember what the first one of his that I read, but he's got like an interesting brand of magical realism. It's like things are just a little bit off, just a little bit of magic that isn't necessarily fully explained in any way that that impacts the story and the characters. And yeah, I mean, this one's, and all the stories are they're different from each other. I mean, they have a similar feel to them, but they're all quite different. And the stories go in different directions. And this one was similar. There's kind of two storylines that you switch back and forth from, and the characters end up being connected to each other, but like you also don't necessarily need them to. Oh, and there's also a storyline that's like in the past, which is kind of backstory for one of the characters that you find out later. Anyway, there's something about his stories that are like, it's confusing at first and you don't necessarily know what's going on, but I kind of like, having read a few, like, I don't mind going on this little journey and not always understanding what's happening, or like to understand that not everything's going to be fully explained, but I also don't feel like it needs to be, yeah, I'm content with it not all making sense in the end, which it doesn't necessarily. And then for the last two books that I've been reading, I got into a conversation with someone on the Slack channel for M to the Third, M to the Third's Slack channel, basically. and we were talking about vampire books, and she had like, I guess she has a history of having worked in bookstores for like a long period of time, and so she has this whole list of like vampire books that are like her essential reads that she rereads all the time. And some of them I had read and some of them I haven't. Many of them I hadn't. So I've sort of been going through, I went through and got a few out of the library and started reading them right away. The first one that I read was Lost Souls by Poppy K. Bright, which is the nom de plume for Billy Martin, who is an author who transitioned, I think, many years ago now. And I guess his books are often about queer characters, and this particular book is like it's like vampire road trip, sort of. And again, you're switching between storylines, and at first it's like you're not sure how they do connect. I mean, this is also an old book. It's like early 90s. So this whole like switching back and forth between characters wasn't old hat then, whereas it's like, it seems like everybody does that now. But it's not written in such a way that it's like frustrating or anything. Like it happens in a good way. And like the characters meet up about halfway through the book, so you're not waiting until the very end for everything to connect and make sense. And there's good vampire action. Like it starts off with like epic vampire action, and then yeah. So you're sort of following the story of this teenager who was born of vampires, and basically there's a different way that vampires are created in this world, which involves like a violent birth, basically. And so this child has been raised from a baby by like a normal family, and then but still is pulled into the life, I guess is the best way to explain it, and runs away from home, and then ends up meeting with this like van full of vampires that just tour around the city, or tour around the United States wreaking havoc. And yeah, and turns out like that's his family, basically. So it's this interesting like dichotomy between like chosen family versus blood family. Yeah, and it's a messy situation. And it was quite violent in places. It was. It was not, I don't know. It never was like too much. It wasn't like, it was never too much and like that I had to put it down or anything like that. It was still very readable and enjoyable and like very vivid and evocative. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. I could see why it was on this list. So I've been working through this like vampire list. This list of vampire books. And then the next book that I started reading is one that I had started a couple years ago. I've been sort of slowly reading through the Anne Rice books, although I hear like don't read all the vampire books by Anne Rice, like just a few of them is good enough. And like there's two on this list that I haven't read yet that are like on the essential vampires. So the one that I'm reading right now is The Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice. I had started this a couple years ago, and I think I only got like a couple chapters into it before I was like, I had to take it back to the library, and I wasn't really into it. So, yeah, sometimes I need like, I think I had recently read the previous one, which was The Vampire Lestat, and it might have been just too much at once. And this particular chapter was of this one character, Daniel, who was the author of the one who transcribed the story of the first of this series, Interview with a Vampire, and his chapter is just really whiny about how much he wants to be a vampire. And yeah, it was just, ugh. Did not enjoy that chapter. But then the chapter that came like right after that is this really interesting character. And like the way this particular book is structured is like you're going through all these different characters, and they have very thick, meaty chapters that get into like the origins of each of these characters and their experiences over time. And like this one character, he's like an Egyptian vampire, one of what they call the first brood of vampires. And he's so old that he's like forgotten much of his life. And so like as he's reawakening and reviving himself, he's like remembering his past, which is a really interesting way to tell backstory. Yeah, so I'm working my way through that at sort of a slow pace, partly because the chapters are really long, and partly because I don't want to rush it, because I'm now at the point that I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, and I guess that's about what I have to talk about today. Vampire books I am into. I mean, after having read some like more serious books, it's nice to have, go into like horror fantasy realm and just read vampire stories. I guess that's my escapism right now. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to talk about. I'm like this close to starting a long form journaling habit. I do use the sort of like true to form bullet journal method, and have done for many years. But like, because I've been like improving my collection of fountain pens and inks, and like it just makes me want to write more. I have since started, I should probably talk about that. I'll talk about my craft journal that I started. Okay. Sort of in response to how Ravelry has kind of become sucky in the past year with their reaction to questions of accessibility on their website, and like dealing with the idea of trying to like rebuild all of that on another website. I decided to create an analog craft journal as a means of like recording my projects as I finish them, and to have something physical that's not dependent on the whims of any one website, and like whether it's going to exist in 20 years or not, or we're all going to have to move to some new website for whatever reason, because the software doesn't exist anymore, or the owners are racist or whatever. So I decided to start a physical knitting journal, and I got a nice notebook. I had a journal that I had I had started a knitting book, journal, whatever. Like, here it is. I had this notebook that I had started. Does it even have a date in it? I think this is, like 2007. No, even earlier than that. I feel like I started this in like 2004. And I will show you, okay, how much of this journal have I even used up? Oh, a fair amount. Okay. So from, let's say, 2004 until 2021, I have used this much of the notebook, which ain't a lot in my mind. It's got some fun stuff in it. I guess. Like, there's a little houndstooth pattern that I wrote for some reason. Here's a little chart I made up, I guess. There's like a drawing. Anyway, and like I made up this pattern for a sweater. I don't know if these notes even make any kind of sense to actually like try and follow to make up a sweater. Here's another chart that I drew. Remember the movie Juno? Remember how she had that really cool sweater vest? That's the chart that I sort of made from that. I was gonna make some squid socks. Those aren't even my drawings. What else do I have in here? Well, there's some other ideas for sweaters I never did. Anyway, yeah, so like, what's that? It's more than 10 years and I can't even fill up this notebook. Part of that is I'm going to say that I didn't really like this notebook and I wasn't maybe using it in an interesting way or a way that compelled me to continue. So, what have I done here? Something that I've done in my bullet journals for the past couple years is just have like a whole list of all of my projects, all of my knitting projects, and then check them off as I finish them. Which is like a nice way to have all your whips kind of in one place. I have some things that I should probably add to this. Or maybe, no, I think we're up to date on there. And so then I just decided to do that for like all the different craft projects that I have. And I actually so I started writing a little bit, you know, basically it was sort of the pertinent information that Ravelry has. And then I put a little place for a picture. Yeah. So it's like an offline version of Ravelry. Is there one that looks exciting here? This one maybe looks exciting. It's an opportunity for me to use a pen and ink that I like. But mostly, the main reason that I'm doing it is that it like gives me, it's like a physical record. So I don't know if future generations are going to care about this or not, but it's something that I can go through and look back at. And like, I mean, it would be so cool to just have this for like every project I've ever done. I mean, Ravelry only goes back for me to 2007. I don't have records that go beyond that. So at the moment, this is like everything that is an active project as of, well, everything that's been an ongoing project as of like the beginning of this year. So I've got some things in here that I finished. So I just pick a picture to print off for it. I'm just going with one picture. And I'm not trying to make it like twee or cute or anything. And yeah, I'm not using stickers. I mean, I've used a little bit of washi tape here and there just to make something like, to make it fit in, because I wasn't always leaving, like here, I didn't leave a place for the picture to go because there's so many yarns. So I just made this like a little fold out kind of thing so that you can see behind it with some washi tape. I don't know. Yeah, it's mostly just the information is here. So, and so far I really enjoyed setting it up. Like I started just with like my active whips, and then I added in all the stuff that I had done for this year, and then I added in all my other projects for all my other crafts. And I like that I can make it be anything that I'm working on, right? So, and it's not in any particular order. I didn't create like sections for things. I'm not trying to get uptight about like how things are ordered. That's why at the beginning, I have the list of projects, which also works as an index. And if I have more than 1 year in here, I can just create another index at a different point over here and just start like another thing and another batch of projects. And so far I'm really enjoying it. This notebook is a Midori notebook, which is just got like a soft cover to it. It's like well, I mean, it's bound, but it's not like, it doesn't have like a proper cover to it. So, and the paper is really nice to write on with a variety of inks. So I thought I would give this a try. And I just got a paper cover to not invest a lot of money in something I wasn't sure if I was going to like or not. But I do like it. Although I have other notebooks that I want to try. So yeah, so this was really fun. And then also, I've been watching a lot of videos by Adventure Denali here on YouTube, she has a long form journaling habit that's like her main hobby, which is sort of how she got into fountain pens. And, you know, she writes with fountain pens all the time and has an interesting collection of like modern and vintage pens and works with really interesting inks and goes camping all the time and hiking and stuff like that. And so she takes her fountain pens with her and then journals in interesting places. Her videos are nice and fun, like they're short. They're usually under 10 minutes. And yeah, so I just get swept up in, oh, maybe I should be writing all the time. But I don't know that I really want to be doing that or not. I have signed up for like a pen pal matchup thing. So we'll see. I haven't had a pen pal since like grade 6 or grade 7 or something. So that should be interesting. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I've been into for the past couple of months. And hopefully it won't be another couple of months until I record again. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Part of like why I sort of waited so long is I didn't feel like I had a lot of stuff to talk about. But I guess we're still at about an hour, so I guess I did have some stuff to talk about. Now I have to clean up this big pile of stuff on the floor. All right. Have a great summer, and I hope you are able to be vaccinated if that's what you want. Reasonably, it's looking good that I should get my second shot like within a month, which is pretty cool. I thought it would be later in the summer. Anyway, take care, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.